Hello. This video is going to be about rhythm in poetry. And I want to start by talking about rhythm in speech, which is easy to understand because it's entirely random. You don't even know when you start talking how long your sentence is going to last, and therefore how long a rhythmic unit you're going to use. Some of them are very long, some short. And you use minor sentences in speech, you get interrupted if it's a conversation, and there are a whole lot of ways in which it's almost impossible to create any sort of patterning with speech in ordinary conversation, in ordinary day life. But it's important to understand that because poets like to use speech rhythm in their poetry. In other words, although we think of poetry as a very structured, carefully created and crafted event, it is often trying to create the illusion that you're listening to someone actually talking. And in modern poetry particularly, this can mean creating something that seems fairly random. Probably isn't actually, but it'll sound like that. And so you'll get lines of completely irregular length. You will get full stops in all sorts of funny places. And it appears as though it's been very carelessly written. In fact, you'll find that if you look carefully at which words receive stress and the way that the rhythm creates a kind of tone of voice and affects how we feel and expresses the feelings of the poet. They'll speak with an angry rhythm, or they'll speak with a very pathetic rhythm, or whatever. And they do control how we respond to the voice of the speaker in a poem by the way they control voice rhythm. Well, then we come to prose. And prose, of course, is more structured. It's not as structured as poetry, but it is more structured. It has sentences for a start, on the whole. They may be minor sentences, but they're still sentences. And they have varied lengths. But there is some control of rhythm. In other words, you make a decision as to how long your sentence is going to be. In the 19th century, people tended to write with much longer sentences, perhaps following a classical model, which we have rejected. And we like, on the whole, shorter sentences, which are perhaps easier to take in quickly. And so that's what you'll find in more modern poetry. But if you look at older poetry, you'll tend to find very long sentences. Milton sometimes wrote a whole paragraph in one sentence. So that is something to look for. But of course, it creates a problem, because you then find you've got two rhythms in a poem. You've got the rhythm that's created by the line length and possibly a rhyme coming at the end of a line, which makes you pause. Rhyme is really a kind of punctuation. And it creates a kind of pause, particularly when you come to the second rhyme. And you tend to want to stop there. Now, if in fact the grammar of the sentence wants to drag you on to the next line, you've got a problem. And it's that kind of creative tension which poets often use deliberately to heighten the feeling and emotion in a poem. And if you can find examples of that for yourself, that would be great. There are loads of them. So what I'm saying is that I think the heart of rhythm in poetry, to understand it, is to understand the conflict between what's normally thought of as poetic rhythm, which is metre and rhyme and a regular line length, and the conflict between all of that and the prose rhythm which underlies that, or is superimposed on it if you want, but it's not the same thing. So you get full stops and commas in the middle of a line, which are nothing to do with the rhyme scheme or the kind of metre that your ears got used to hearing Now that's a very creative tension. Some people have talked about it rather like having tension on a violin string or a guitar string if you want. And if you didn't pull at both ends, you wouldn't create your music. And music has a lot in common with poetry. You're familiar, for example, with cross rhythms in music, where you get one instrument playing in 3/4 time and another one playing in 4/4 time. Or you get in music a sudden change of key, so, or you can get a sudden change of rhythm in music, and that can create a kind of crunch, in emotional crunch in the listener or the reader. And you get the same thing in poetry by this cross rhythm. And so you get a run-on line followed by a full stop, and suddenly it hits you, and you feel through the rhythm the emotion that the poet is trying to communicate and share with us. Now that's all I'm going to say for the moment about rhythm in poetry, but there's a lot more to say about metre, line length, stanza length, and how some of the great poets of the past have used rhythm in their poetry, and comparing that with more modern poetry. But that's for another time. Thank you for listening, and I hope to see you next time. Bye then.